One would have thought that it's a rather important topic, this one of relationships. That's what one would have thought. And you're all here because somewhere in your mind you're saying it's jolly well important to me. Well, I'd like you to take a moment to think this. If you're in a relationship, of all the priorities in your life, is that first? Put up your hand, all you liars, if it is. No, there are all sorts of factors come into your life that will preclude you from putting your relationship first. All sorts of pressures and all sorts of reasons to not do that. For those with children, it would be sometimes the children, mostly it's the work. You see, relationships more than anything define your character. You don't necessarily have the character when you enter the relationship that's required. But it will define it as we go. So now we've got that clear, that it doesn't have the priority that you're kidding yourself that it does. Let us move forward with relationships. And some of you will know that there is a little technical set of words that describes a relationship, and more or less that is that two people, by the way, for the sake of discussion, can we be a trifle old-fashioned and without excluding anyone at all, but for the sake of ease, so we don't have to go through a long definition each time, we'll talk tonight of relationships of men and women, but the same applies no matter who it's with, except perhaps your dog. Yes, that would be a rather difficult subject if it was something abnormal with your animal, wouldn't it? But we won't go into that sort of relationship tonight because there are not many farmers here. So, God bless the farmers. No offense, of course, that's just a trite joke. In a relationship between two people, that something has to give, and both decide that each will give up something of themselves. And the reason that they'll do that is so that both can advance further together than they otherwise would themselves. Now, not everyone's destined to be in a relationship, and not everyone's able to be in a relationship, and not everyone's able to cope in a relationship because of the fact of having to give up something. It might be said that there's something quite sneaky about the design of humans, because we put into your mind this need to be with other people. The exception of fear, your greatest fear is aloneness, that is fear itself. Your greatest fear is aloneness. That drives people towards a relationship, and if they don't get a relationship in the form of a one-on-one, they'll try and form different bonds with different people to form other sorts of relationships to compensate. That is what makes work for so many people so important as well, because they're able to form bonds and associations. That's a bother by itself when you're in a relationship, because you come home exhausted from being in a dozen relationships during the day and you have no desire to be in another one. I'm way too tired, I've expended all of my energy there, so can you just shut up? That would go down rather well, wouldn't it? But that's more or less what happens. But we'll come to all of these little things about relationships. So if I were just establishing what a relationship is. Now let's ponder that for a moment. We each give up something, but that means not once. That means not at the start of the relationship. That means forever, permanently, until we part. Who thinks of that? Who ponders that each night, each week, each month? What am I giving up? Is it enough? Is it enough to help my partner? My so-called loved one? We'll leave love out of it for a moment, because sometimes that happens in a relationship, albeit occasionally. It's not something you ponder because you're jolly well too self-centered. Most people are thinking about themselves in a relationship. I'm not talking about you and the pursuit of your life. Not at all. That's entirely different. But our focus for tonight's discussion is within a relationship, within the realms of a relationship. Am I giving up enough of me? Do I want to give up enough of me? Am I a sad sack when I have to give up enough of me? If my other one, my partner, is giving up a lot for me, am I appreciative? Or do I take it for granted? And I'll warrant you this in a relationship, that if the other one is giving up more than you and you're not appreciative, they'll stop. A few things will happen. They'll go and find other people to talk to about their issues, and you'll be slowly cut out. And then they'll go and pursue other things for themselves. And the relationship is on the wane. All because you're not giving up enough of yourself. The problem with that, of course, is if you enter a relationship and you're a long way behind the game of life, in other words, your development is slow, minuscule, microscopic, backward. Call it what you might. And not many people will look in the mirror and tell themselves such a story. And when told by a partner, I mean, apoplectic. So when you enter a relationship and you've escaped doing much development, and then you decide, well, I'm jolly well going to make a good fist of this, and I'm going to give up something, and I'm going to give up quite a bit, and you do. And then, blow me down, your partner says to you, well, that's just fabulous. That's a dashing start. Now try this, and try that. This is mostly men, but not only. Will say, would you hold on? I've already given up so much. I've really changed so much. That should do us for life. Because I haven't got this notion in a relationship that it's ongoing. It's not actually something you visit once a month. It should be as required, which might be daily. So relationships are filtering so far in the definition and the application of the terms of the definition. The next thing is, still on the same discussion of in the definition, that is, we're giving up something so that we can both progress further than we might alone, indeed would alone. How often do you stop and reflect upon that? How's my partner developing? Are they developing faster because of me or slower because of me? Are they taking way too much time trying to get me to catch up to them, therefore precluding themselves? Am I not growing because I don't want to? And on it goes. It's such a complex discussion. There are so many variable factors that it comes down to a rather simple equation, and that is one or the other doesn't care enough about the other. So this is when the selfishness required to progress in life is a different factor in a relationship. It's meant to be one of equal giving, not necessarily of equal levels or standards. It's meant to be one of appreciation, rarely is. If you're not saying to yourself, my partner just doesn't seem to be growing enough. What is wrong with them? I want you to say that to yourself in the mirror and say, I can see the problem. It's staring me in the face. Yes. Recognition. I think I know that person as well. Vaguely familiar. But they look older than I last remembered. Yes. That's probably because it's afternoon time, not morning. Yes. There'd be no other reason to look older, would there? So it's that lack of. It's that lack of getting out of your own way. This makes relationships problematic. Because one, you don't put them as number one priority in a relationship. Not necessarily in your life, but within the realms of the relationship should be first. I mean, a relationship, what should be first? Oh, golly gosh, this is complex, I wonder what it might be. The relationship. Some might call that self-evident, but it's not to most humans. When one of the people, if not both, are preoccupied with their career, their job, there's external forces outside of the relationship. Their focus is going to be on that. And they will come home and expect all forms of support and understanding and tolerance. And they'll whinge and sook away. Excuse me, I know you want to talk about a relationship, but my phone's ringing. I won't be long because I'm horny. This is the way of life. It's not about the relationship. whilst I say this is mostly men, it's not only. For women, have this terrible habit of being too quiet, putting up with too much, pretending that all's well, believing that their role is to sate their man. How do you think that helps a man? It will help his ego grow. It'll help him have an inflated sense of self. It'll help him ignore the woman, but it won't do much for the relationship, will it? You're such a good dear for telling me I'm so good. Thank you. I agree with you. That's more or less what will happen. It's rather sad, isn't it? So, thus far what we've got is a lack of priority, a lack of understanding, and a lack of application once you gain that understanding. And no real desire to do any of that. Because a relationship is not something that's trained to be prepared for. The most you've got generally is to eye off the relationship of your parent or parents, and perhaps one or two others. What that does in most cases is say what's called the lowest common denominator argument. That's pretty bad, but that's what's to be expected. Now I prefer to have a relationship than not, so that's what's waiting for me. And unfortunately, the people who suffer the most and have the least love in their upbringing are the ones who either end up in the worst relationship or cause the worst relationship. They'll end up in the worst relationship because they'll accept anything, because they feel so terribly about themselves. They'll cause a disaster to justify their upbringing and to prove that they're quite normal and sane. It's an interesting thing, that sanity, isn't it? I'm not sure how many people are sane at the age of 18. Not too many. But let's put that aside, because it's not quite where we want to go. Let's move now to love. It's a quaint notion. Love in a relationship predominantly is this. I'm a chef and I make cakes. And in my cake I need flour. And I have to bake 1,000 cakes for the rest of my life. I'll use flour in the first one and expect somehow to make the same kind of cakes for the other 999 without flour. If the chef said that to you, this is my plan, you would say, I think you're in the wrong job, old chap. It's not going to work. You need flour for every cake. How often do you think? Love is this notion, which is a feeling, which sometimes will come at in the early stages of a relationship. That's a wonderful feeling. Thank you, I've got it. That will suffice me for the rest of my time. And I don't have to work too hard to grow it. And this is outside of appreciation. This is outside of everything. This is love. And those that have never had it, or have it just at the beginning, will quickly give it up. I don't need it anymore. There are other things to keep my attention, my job, my power, my status, my importance. And at that point when you're deciding not to build upon the love in a relationship, the relationship's over. You might be together, but it's over. I want to move aside for a moment. This is an unusual term, relationships, because I've defined it. Not that many people in the world are in relationships. Most are coupling. Like two train carriages put together. No more. Stuck together. On the same track. Coupled. That describes most unions. If I was being extremely generous, I would say to you that 25% of relationships are relationships. If I was being honest, and I wasn't trying to please you, I would tell you the truth. 8%. 8. That's a single digit, 8. 2 circles joined. The rest are coupling. So there's a lot of dissatisfaction within relationships. What's sad about that is that there's a lot of dissatisfaction in work. There's a lot of dissatisfaction about just raising children. Where does the satisfaction come? My whole life is bereft. Women recognize this much more quickly than men. Usually around 35. Men are predominantly lazy and let it all go along because it allows them not to have to worry about the relationship and do other things that are more important to the man. Now, by the way, I'm sitting here talking to you. I don't want you to think that I had any real notion of relationships when I was alive. I didn't, but it was quite organized. Now, I will come to that because it's relevant. Because if any of you chose to read anything about me of accuracy, you would find that that wasn't so. And I don't want in any respect to appear hypocritical to you. So it's a damning proposition I'm putting to you. And what was meant in the scheme of life is that what would rescue you are relationships. The practical outcome is that they're damning you because you're not putting in the work, because you're not thinking of love, because you're thinking of coupling, because you don't foresee that the permanency to the relationship is, as the French would say, pari passu, in proportion with what you put in. And there should not be a time in your life in a relationship when you don't continue to have to put in. And if you don't, the relationship will fail. And then you'll revert firstly to coupling. And then what happens after that in most but not all cases is someone will pull the pin on the coupling and split the carriages on the track and allow one to go down a side track. And then we're apart. And blow me down, what do people say? I'm lonely. I want another relationship. Well, they never had one. Or if they did, they lost it. And they want another one. I can't imagine anything more selfish than the person who would do that. I've just failed in a relationship, and without making any significant change, I want another one. Therefore, they're saying, I've used that person, and now I'm ready to use that person. I'll just get someone a little bit more backward than the other one who will believe me. It's very sad. It's a damning picture I'm giving you, but there's hope somewhere, I hope. I'll find out. Well, I should digress for a moment and tell you that my relationship when I was alive with my dear wife was satisfactory because we had that arranged. I needed her because in the position in which I worked, I needed to appear to have a wife. She needed me because her father said, you need to be with a man of station. No money, but station. I've got the money, says the father. He's got the station. You'll be fine. And it was in that respect arranged, contrived, but mutually so. Therefore it was satisfactory. Therefore it worked. And if you have such a relationship now, that's fine. All of this, before it gets better, gets worse. I have a high respect for my good friend Sigmund Freud. And arguably it might have been him who delivered this lecture, but we feared he would put you to sleep. So he was banished to the bar. Go and take a whiskey, Sigmund, and listen. He obliged. Thus I'm here. So I wonder at the brain power of anyone who questions his work. That one of the most beautiful and easy and accurate portals, entry points into human behavior, the mind, is through sex. Let's think about that for a moment in terms of relationships. Before the relationship, in more modern times, quite openly, there's a need and desire for sex and sexual activity in all of its variety of forms, an exploration, It would be unheard of that that didn't happen. And it might be that you're told that there was a time when people married in a virginal state. Did they? Had they ever masturbated? Had they ever thought of another woman? Had they ever thought of having sex with another woman? Had they ever thought of having sex with their woman or their man? Of course. Had they explored each other's bodies? Yes, certainly. But they were fine because they might not have had intercourse, and if they had, it was a secret. We shan't admit that. So the only difference was there was lots of sexual activity, some of which was hidden, all of which was denied, just to suit the social status of their mother, who had probably done worse, and who also lied about it. As an aside again, I have lots of asides, it seems, that we have a particular ability from where we sit to look back through lineage and see the behavior of people in the family line back through time. And I can assure you that in one way or another, most of the mothers were dirty trollops. And the genetic was there, so it passed on regardless. So did the secret. So all I'm saying this to you for is to give you this notion that sex is important. But how important? This is where spiritually karma comes into it. There'll be some relationships. There's the most wonderful sexual compatibility. Mostly there's not. Mostly there'll be at different stages, not only of sexual experience, desire, and so on. So sex becomes more difficult than it ought to be and becomes a sense of frustration. And one partner will want to either do or to explore forms of sexual activity. And the other one at a different level says, no, not at all, that doesn't suit me. Or we have a tension. Sometimes that's reserved, mostly not. So sex becomes quite an important part of a relationship. Gets worse, again. Usually the woman, but not always, but usually the woman. In a normal relationship between a man and a woman, where both are attempting in some form or another to obey the rules of the land and the customs and cultures through time. Usually the woman who has the ability to say no, that there is a sexual activity tonight or there's not. They quickly learn of their power over a man. And they quickly learn of their power to affect a man's behavior. And it can be very off-putting to a man to be told, no, stop that, I'm not interested, go away. And that will affect the mood, and that will affect the form of the relationship for some quite period of time thereafter. But worse, much worse, is the woman who controls their man through the application of sex. They have a mental problem, a disturbance of the mind. That is to say, this is what I'm feeling about you and it's not healthy. Right now I'm not feeling loving, I'm not feeling endowed towards you, I'm not feeling at all kind or benevolent. But I know to keep you on side and to shut up your whinging and just to get on with our life, you can have sex. And then at some stage or other into the future they'll complain about the behavior of their man, not taking into account their needs. To my great chagrin, my upset, I watch women court favor with men through the use of sex. I watch women obtain possessions in a relationship through the provision of sex. I'm not sure I know anything much more demeaning than that. How could you do that and expect to be treated properly, and fairly and equally? What are you giving up so that the other can grow? You're demeaning yourself, you're giving up what you want and allowing your body to be used as a sponge. But there's no growth. There's just a sexual release. So let's move forward from there and think of this. With all of those difficulties in a relationship that relate to sex, and I've but touched upon them, it is a minefield. And Sigmund was entirely right and people's attitudes, not only sex, but different forms of sexual activity. It will give you a look into who they are and who they've allowed themselves to become. But in the definition of a relationship, I don't remember anything there saying you must have sex. So can you have a platonic relationship? Not an association relationship. I did, but that was predominantly because of my entirely different sexual persuasion. But it's unconsidered in almost all cases. And it matters not what gender. There's some belief that says a relationship comes with an entitlement of sex. After that initial promiscuity, that initial exploration, I'm entitled to sex, man or woman. And I'm entitled to it on these number of occasions. That's the thought of a non-thinker. Oftentimes they will have a mental disturbance, but mostly it will be cultural. They've learnt it and believed it somewhere without exploring its application to themselves. If you think that it's anathema, it's strange, it's odd, it's not normal to have a relationship without sex. Can you answer me this? Why do older people stay together when sex is not a function anymore? Why don't they split up? It doesn't matter that they've been together for 50 years or whatever. Once sex is no longer available, they should split, but they don't. And the question becomes, why not? And most of you would say because they're too old to do anything about it. Are they? Ask them if they're old. Only physically they'll feel old. They don't actually feel any different to when they did know at 25. It's quite a shock to people to realize that their body is aging and they're going to die. It causes an immense change. Why do I think differently to that? So this is a confusion. What caused people? Oh yes, there's a level of convenience. There's no question about that. But this overly reliance upon sex in a relationship says, when sex is no longer possible or needed or wanted, we shall split. It defies your logic. It's causing you to think of this now, but probably not before. So why do they stay together? Because they want each other to continue to grow. Because the journey's not finished and they recognize that. Because in some cases they've done this silly little thing of loved each other continuously and forever growing. Because they want to spend the rest of time together and one or the other will know that the other one will require their care. And that's absolutely fine and satisfactory to them. They recognize that there was a time and a role for sex. It's not what a part of that couple needs at that stage of their life. But that's cultural. Could it be that there's an agreement between a couple at a much younger age, whether that be in their 20s, 30s, or 40s, or 50s, that says we will have a platonic relationship? Of course there can be. Of course there can be. But because of the way you've been raised and schooled, it would cause a lot of disquiet, a lot of suspicion, particularly from men. If they don't want sex from me, they must be wanting it from someone else, because men are taught that women have to have sex, they need it. And we're the provider. Lucky you. Yes. You've got Mr. Stud. Why do you think that men don't particularly like showering in public and amongst all other men? The myth has exploded, isn't it? They might not be Mr. Stud at all. So it would require a lot of work. It would require a lot of discussion. But it's possible. Because if you're in a relationship that has longevity, it's going to happen. The sexual activity will become less frequent and less vibrant, as they say. There'll be less rocking. It'll be more gentle. Don't be confused. To a man, that would, especially a younger man, gentle equals failure. One of the reasons that there's a slow decree, one of the emotional and mental reasons and design factors, apart from the way the body works, is to allow, of this slow decrease of sexual activity, is to allow men and women the opportunity to adjust to the fact that there are different sexual needs through time. Now let me explore this a little bit further for you. If sex is so important in a relationship, it's such a critical part of it, and one or both of you make it so, why is it that in very broad terms, a man is his most potent sexually, that is to say, in his erectile function, between 18 and 24. A woman in her 40s, the first half of her 40s. It's a sick joke, isn't it? Why is it that just as a woman reaches her sexual peak in her early 40s, a man begins andropause, stage 1, about 42 or 3? Why is it that a man gets frustrated when his lady has menopause and can put all of the blame upon her but doesn't realize that he's in phase 2 of andropause at the same time, around 47 to 48? All of these are decreased sexual function. Why is it that the woman comes out of menopause having complained bitterly in the early 50s, just as the man goes into his most significant phase of andropause, the old big droop phase, around 53? Woe is me, says the man. I've just been through menopause. What are you bitching about? Nothing wrong with you. Nothing but my wrists ache, my joints creak, and my penis won't rise. That's all that's wrong with me, woman, and it's your fault. Do you understand that the woman works herself through menopause and finds ways naturally or otherwise to become interested in sex again and the operation of, if I might say, her vagina, and then the man goes through another stage of andropause in his early 60s, reducing his sexual function further. So as she becomes interested again, he has further problems. With all of this knowledge, have you not worked out that it might not be as important as you think? Have you not worked out that it's made difficult for you? So you might put a different priority on it, and there's something more important in a relationship than sex? We call it love. Love will come from all sorts of factors, but it's within. It will grow through kindness. It will grow through appreciation. It will grow through listening. It will grow through feeling. But mostly it will go through understanding of your partner and what they're going through. And hopefully, and the big hope in any relationship is that if you're doing that, they just might learn and do it back. Reciprocate might be the word. That doesn't always happen. It will be more occasional. But that's your hope. And it's the only hope a human has when they're in existence with another human, is that if you act in all of the proper ways, the other one might learn. And they might copy you, they might duplicate, and if they don't want to be with you, they just want to use you. Let us move on to the next thing. Let us imagine for a moment that you've decided to come along tonight to learn something about relationships because you know that yours is in a tad of trouble and you want to make it a little bit better. So you say. But if you're existing in a relationship, you don't want to make it better at all. It's just a place to be. It's habit forming. A relationship is habit forming. And expectations take place which cause habits. I expect you to do these things and to behave in this way, and vice versa. And they happen without appreciation, without understanding the debt you're building up to each other. If you're in such a relationship, you're making yourself sick. Why is it that so many people say, I have to do what my karma tells me? But I want to stay in a relationship because it's easy and I feel nothing, I have no love, but I have money. But I can't see how that's slowing down me paying back my karma. Without them realizing that part of the karma relate to being in a relationship such as that, where they're denuded of their own power, where it becomes about possessions, that is one of the saddest factors. You can't achieve in a relationship that's not working for you. You can't find the satisfaction that you need or want in life. You can't find the growth. It just can't happen. So what you're doing is living in a permanent state of misery. It is equated to being in jail with a day release. But you return to the jail each night to be locked up. Not a pleasant thought, slightly better than being permanently incarcerated, but that's all. Such people are lazy. Lazy emotionally and lazy spiritually. And they're full of self-importance and a lack of identity and a lack of understanding of who they are and a lack of purpose. Why would I bother talking about all of this tonight? Because I would like to see that 8% increase. I would like that to be 80%. Of relationships are relationships, not couplings, not stuck together in a bond of laziness and anger, where one begins to loathe the other. And I can assure you of one thing: as soon as one partner begins to loathe the other one, it won't be long before the other one loathes that one. Then we have two loathes, no one goes hungry. So what therefore do we do? I've tried to touch upon many of the difficulties you face. It's rather simple. You don't make it enough of a priority because you don't understand a relationship, because no one will taught you. It's just one of those forms of magic that happens. Two people come together and all shall be well. If ever you see someone getting married and they say, "Can anyone give me a piece of advice?" the answer should be, don't get married. Because if you need to ask that question, you're in diabolical trouble. And there is no general answer. You see, it's evident to all of you, not only from your teaching, but through the application of your life, and that your primary purpose is to increase your capacity to love, which means to give. And as a consequence of giving, hopefully you shall receive. The amount you're receiving back in proportion to your giving will be part or mostly dependent upon your past lives. Because it might be that you have a duty this time to learn to give and not get back enough because of what you've done previously. It is very possible that I might have lost you. I think I've lost myself. It's not something one would ever admit to a student at university, by the way. I'm confused. But what I'm confused about is the lack of clarity of the purpose of a relationship. I just want to make this extremely clear to you, that if you're in a relationship and you have this notion somewhere that there's a bond, and from that bond we have a togetherness, and from the togetherness we might grow, and in that growth there shall be love. Well, in most of you are failing. And then it's made more complex yet again by the human characteristics. Your karma says you're too sensitive. Your karma says you can't be wrong. Therefore I'm too defensive. You can't withstand the pressure of your work, so you become aggressive, short-tempered. You feel misunderstood from your childhood, so you need to be understood more than anything by your partner, and you probably won't be. You come from a family where you weren't heard. So the biggest thing you want in a partner is to be heard. So you talk. And you expect them to listen until they get bored or nod off, and you say, "You're not listening." And they'll say, "I did for the first 4 hours." But you're not satisfied with that because of your need to be heard. And not that many people, not that many couples are in tune enough with each other, let alone themselves, to say, you seem to have a need to be heard. What caused that? What would think that I can listen to you in the detail that you need? Because I'm impatiently waiting to tell you my story. This is where equality comes in. How much time do you devote in a night to sharing the woes of your day? And when do you get into something positive or future or planning? Where is the good? Do you see how you're being trained in life? to feel and at times express the bad. But there's so little time to feel and express the good. Much less than the bad, because of human behavior to you. So what you want to do is express the details but not understand the concept. So couples together don't really get to know each other. They'll just close their ears because he or she is whinging or going on again, without pondering, how can I help my partner to grow? This is the pattern of your behavior that I have discerned. Do you want to ponder that for yourself or go and get help on that? Because if we're going to fly together and our relationship is going to take off into places unknown at this point, this is what you need to do. This comes back to where we started. If you're in a relationship and the relationship is not the most important thing to you, you're doomed. Within that relationship, you're only there so you can progress further than if you're out of it. If you're not, you're wasting time. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to leave the relationship. That would be a choice. If you're choosing not to put enough of your own love into the relationship, if you're not feeling enough need to give love in a relationship, it's failing. If your partner is giving far more love and appreciation and growth to you than you are to them, you're selfish. You lack appreciation. You're a taker. You're emotionally lazy. You're manipulating them. You're holding out some vague hope that they'll get back something for all of their effort. And usually that's men doing this to women. And the woman suffers. Now let us go on to one of the last points in a relationship before I take this in another slightly different direction. Power. I spoke shortly about equality in a relationship, but of course there's no such thing. There are lots of ways to gain an ascendancy in a relationship. For a woman, as I said, through the use of sex is quite easy. Through the use of moods, it's very easy. Through the use of exclusion, it's very easy. For the use of threats, it's very easy. For a man, he usually wants to overpower with his strength and the loudness of the voice. And I will cut this from you and I will cut that from you. Another aside. You know a man who's lost in the need for power. They're in a poor relationship. They'll come home and they'll be confronted with something that's gone wrong and they'll threaten, shout and abuse their partner. You do this, you do that, you do the other. Doing nothing themselves, not seeing what they've done or contributed to it. And then walk away and think that all will be well. But that's not what the partner is thinking. They're thinking, dash you. So by and large, in most relationships through the process of evolution, of prior knowledge, one's going to be more advanced than the other. The advanced one has a greater duty to teach the other, to give up more, to be more tolerant, to be more understanding, to foresee the benefits of doing this with their partner, where there'll be more mutual growth into the future over time. But mostly in relationships, there's an abuse of power. When someone doesn't really want to be in a relationship or they don't care enough about it, they'll just abuse their power. They'll just take their position of dominance and issue their instructions like they're the Lord Almighty, at the same time hurting. There are no more hurts visited upon people than people in a supposedly loving relationship. And that's intentional. It's not an accident. And it's all because one or the other at a point in time feels misunderstood, not heard, characterized poorly, not getting what they need, feels that there's an imbalance of power, and so begins a fight. And in a relationship, certainly not exclusively, but mostly, The woman will be the one who says there's an imbalance of power. She won't use that terminology, of course. You're doing this and you're doing that. But what she's referring to is an imbalance of power. The man's abusing his power. And the way of a man in a relationship is to say, oh golly gosh, I'm caught. How shall I defend myself? Let's go tit for tat. But these are the things you do. Or try and argue off on some irrelevancy. This is not only men, but it's mostly. When this happens, the process of recovery from the hurts is long and slow. It's not recovered. It builds up. And it builds up into a loathing. The most complex of all relationships are when there's an equality, when both are at the same level of evolution. The most complex of all relationships are when you're kindred spirits, that is to say, you're one of each other's 16, group of 16. For you're seeing in the other one all of your own good and bad. And everything that's bad you see in the other one is the bad in you. You might or might not be doing it at that moment, but that's what you're seeing. It infuriates you because you're infuriated at yourself. How dare you behave as poorly as I do? And that's what takes place, and it takes a long time to work out. So, what I've just added to you in all of this is the difficulties of making a relationship work. I'm trying to explain what I was talking about at the beginning. It's a lifelong journey. The good news is that you're all given lots of hope. You don't need it from me. The proof of that will be you'll have a relationship breakup. What happens next is a period of grief, of loss, of bereavement. And then comes the yearning to be not alone. And because you're actually no different no matter what your age to what you thought when you were 16, next comes the thoughts of sex and the naughtiness of it. And somehow, from some miracle, totally unrelated, you believe that following that there might be love in a relationship. They're unrelated. Great love is not related to a sexual compatibility at all. That could be to ease the path of the great love, if there is, and if there's not, it'll be a burden to overcome to earn the great love. By and large, I'm saying to you that sex is a byway. It'll take you off the highway. And you need to consider that. A bigger problem when there's an age difference in a relationship, no matter which way. Unfortunately, I need to go one step further, and I don't really want to because it's not about a sexual discussion. But the less a man has an identity, the more he's confused about himself, the more he lusts for power, the more sex he wants. Anyone who says, my partner and I have sex regularly, this many times a week, that'd be 1, 2, 3 or whatever. You're looking at a failed relationship. It's meant to come from a feeling. It's meant to come from a desire. Let me go back, I will continue this, let me go back to this. If sex is meant to come from a feeling and a desire, what do the elderly people do? They'll explore the feeling and the desire, unless they've lost the verve for life. And they'll touch, they'll canoodle and they'll caress and they'll kiss and they'll do whatever. And it probably won't end in intercourse, because for one or both that's not needed, wanted, or they're not capable. But every other benefit is there. And it's called a coming together, not in a lewd sense. Just a coming together of two people. That's what sex at any age is meant to symbolize. A coming together to generate good feelings. And when two people come together with a love and have sex, it'll generate even better feelings. That then is beneficial to a relationship. There is no doubt about that. But I'm saying it's possible to have a relationship that's platonic, and the elderly prove that. But you try to prove yourself to each other in the ways of the young. Because when it comes to relationships and sex, people don't grow up. They're emotionally stuck on about 16. whatever time the first explorations were for them, they'll be emotionally stuck on that point. The best relationships, even when you're in a kindred spirit in a 16, is when you can find out about yourself and who you really are, and have that exposed to you, and decide to do something about that. And that's a relationship, because there's growth, there's love. You're doing what you came to earth to do, and it will inspire you to do more. Where there's an imbalance of power, where there's a lack of honesty, a lack of discussion, there's no growth, there's no love. There's one more I want to touch upon, and that is a relationship between two people. Let us imagine a man and a woman. That is effectively a business relationship. But we're together because it would affect our finances poorly if we weren't. And neither of us want that. So let us work out how we can get on. And they will have the most beautiful and in-depth discussions to solve most problems, just like a good businessman does and a good businesswoman might. They might be sitting in a boardroom, working through the problems of life so they can continue their business relationship. They will end up wealthy. They will end up successful, bereft of love, dissatisfied, angry, and sooner or later attack each other. It can't work. That's not what a relationship is meant for. When the relationship and the definition says to grow, that doesn't mean to grow just financially. That is of trite concern to us in the world of spirit. What I've tried to do is prompt you to consider your priorities. Because at the start of every problem and every relationship, at least one of you will have a different priority to the relationship. Let us imagine, to use the work we do, that someone decides that they want to become a counselor, a spiritual counselor. That will, in effect, take them away from the relationship, but only for a point in time. It will allow them to reflect and bring the reflection and the knowledge back into the relationship. If they don't, they're selfish and they don't deserve it. But in such a course, they would be taught honesty, and it would allow them to bring back and to put in and to challenge. And that will make the other person decidedly uncomfortable. But at least they'll have a choice, they'll have the knowledge, they'll have the honesty, the option of honesty to do something about it. So all of the knowledge and power that the person doing the course is getting, which is putting them in a position above the second person in the relationship, they're putting back in to try and allow that person to grow, to catch up to them. That's equality. That's how it's meant to work. A relationship doesn't mean everything is done together, at the same time, at the same pace. Quick and easy words to say. But if you're feeling intolerant to your partner, that is the point you question. Why are they not changing? Why are they not growing? What can I do to help? And once you've done it and exhausted yourself to help them, if they don't change, they're just too scared to say, I don't want to be with you. So they'll do it through their actions, and they'll hurt you more slowly. For dishonesty, my friends, is a way of hurting slowly. Truth hurts once. I found it an honor to be with you. My name was, but for all intents and purposes still is, Francis B. Thank you.